Hello, and thank you for joining us today for Through Grief into Healing with Sandy Walden. I have my little disclaimer I want to read first. That information and resources shared are not intended as and shall not be understood or construed as medical or health advice. Information shared is not a substitute for medical advice from a professional who is aware of the facts and circumstances of your individual situation. And if you find value listening to us, please like and subscribe and share with others, because the more people are involved in these conversations, the more healing happens. So I am so grateful to be joined today by two women who are incredibly wise. So welcome, Sandy, and welcome, Dawn. I'm glad you're joining me for this conversation today. And what we want to talk about is grief's double burden, navigating stigma and healing. And when we talk about deaths that are stigmatized, a few that come to mind for me, and please share any that come to mind for you. I think about somebody who often has died. They've only died once, haven't they? Often it is a death by suicide. Maybe somebody who died while committing a crime. It could be somebody who died in a drunk driving accident, overdose. Please, Ed, do you have any others that come to mind for you immediately? I know that there's many, many.
Well, as we were chatting before the recording started, we talked about, even if it's somebody who dies from cancer, well, like lung cancer, well, you smoked, what do you expect? It's just, there can be stigma attached to anything, really. Even a murder, like, oh, what kind of situation, what kind of life did they lead that they would get involved in something like that would get themselves killed? And, people say stuff and it's heartless and baseless.
And really the whole point, when I think about any of these things, we've all had experiences with a variety of losses. And if you're over 5 years old, you probably have had your own grief experience of one sort or another, whether it's your doll, your friend, grandma, grandpa, a neighbor, something has been lost. And so what I always think about is that when someone has died, even a death that we consider shameful, and we want to do everything we can to eliminate that, don't we? So we're going to be talking about that. The people who left behind are still hurting, and sometimes they're hurting much more because they aren't receiving support.
Yeah. Absolutely. Especially, I think that's true in a suicide, because it was a choice of that person to do that. And anytime something like that happens, people love to point the finger at why. And they can't understand, because there is no way of easily understanding it, on pointing the finger at the person who did it. So then they will look at the people who are close to them and, and they'll say, well, what did you do? What did you not do? Why didn't you stop this? And so I think a lot of that is really difficult for the people who are grieving, because obviously they cared about that person.
Horrifically painful. I think about like the horrible school shootings that we have. And often the shooter will end their own life. And sometimes I think it's a choice. Sometimes I think that mental illness took over. And I'm sure there's a whole basket full of other things that I'm not aware of. But I think those people still are grieving that person who died, and they have the additional grief of what had happened, what they had done. But can't we still offer that person support and compassion?
They probably need it as much or more than many other people who are going through grief of a loss of anyone, especially a tragic one.
Yeah, have you seen the one of the Columbine shooters' moms, Claybo? His mom has been speaking. And I've seen I want to say it was a TED Talk, but I don't know for sure if it was a TED Talk. But she's been speaking, and yeah, my heart goes out to her. I mean, she lost her son, and then to have what he did on top of it. I mean,
Mm.
that's
I
got to be
agree.
absolutely heart-wrenching.
I've
Yeah.
listened to her too, and I was so touched with the compassion that she pours out to others. And I think, oh my gosh, I hope she's getting some of that back.
Yeah.
I remember years ago when I used to deal with primarily people who had lost to suicide, but talking to a man who had lost his son killed his wife and children and then ended his own life. And this man was getting no sympathy. People were saying horrible things about where his son was destined after this life. You're evil, you're this, you're that. We all get the idea. And what horrible additional wounds were piled on this man. So some of the things we talked about, and we've talked about in other places and times, and we'll continue talking about, is how can we reach out to these people who deserve our support and our compassion? How do you set aside that judgment of how someone may have died and reach out to this person who's got a broken heart?
I think that answer is going to be the same across the board. If, especially if it was an unexpected death, the suicide should be the same as the car accident. You're going to take care of the immediate family. You're going to make sure that they eat. You're going to make sure that they, you help them clean up their house, because there's people coming and going all the time. You do the things. And that was done for me, and I think that what our society lacks, and this isn't every family, but it's pretty common with the people that I talk to. Life goes on for everybody else while the grievers are still, the immediate grievers are still like in the thick of it. So, there's a select few that will continuously reach out and make it a regular thing for the long term. And that's just beautiful. So I think
I agree.
more people need to be aware of how important that is.
You know what this makes me think of in my circumstance, because I was in a state where I knew people that I worked with. And I certainly knew the people in my neighborhood. And matter of fact, I really felt fairly close to the people in my neighborhood. Yet when my husband took his own life, and those same people, not one of them came over to even say, and I can understand when all the police cars are there, okay, that's pretty tough. What about the next day? You really could not come to the door and say, wow, Dawn, is there anything you need? And there was only one person in the neighborhood who did that. And her husband was exactly my age, the guy who ran. He was the healthiest guy in the neighborhood. He died of a heart attack about 2 months before my husband. And I mean, this was totally unexpected. And I didn't really know her that well. I mean, she was close by, but I just didn't really know her that well. And she came over to the car and asked if she could sit with me while the whole investigation thing was going on. And oh my God, I was just like, I'm so in awe of her doing that, And she sat with me until the victim assistance person came. But then she also did stuff with me after that, And it's like, for neighbors in particular, they are the ones who can do, I think, the most, because they're there. And it was just like, it just doesn't take that much to just come over and, say hello, or invite you to their house to have coffee, or, something just to say I care, or even a card. I don't think I even got a card. And I'm just like you say, if he had died in an automobile accident, it would have been different, or had a heart attack.
And some of those things I think about, how many things I've lost people to heart attacks or cancer or other things, and I don't hear them that person described as the heart attack, the cancer. But I might hear someone describe someone who decided of suicide, oh, the suicide, or the murder, or the overdose. And I think that's just additional wounding for the people who are missing them. So when I think about it, I think about, can we not rehash the mistakes that person made, whether you believe they were good, bad, evil, innocent, or something in between? Can we honor what that person that we're sitting with is going through? Can we not talk about this person being in hell and suffering? Do we need to pile those things up? I don't believe that happens anyway, but can we meet them where they are? Can we turn off the TV or the radio? Because those horrific labels are often given to somebody who died in a crime or an overdose, or often a suicide. And things are complicated. Things are complicated. Can we come back to, tell me about a warm memory? Can we let them know that they matter and the person they're missing matters?
Yeah. I could see a question just came to me, and I don't know how much afterwards you would bring this up, but I could just see someone saying, well, what's your favorite memory about your loved one? What is the thing you loved most about them? You know?
What would you like us to know?
Yeah.
Well,
I
and I
mean,
think, you know, depending on the person too, because like if it was a suicide death and the person was very, you know, the immediate grievers are very angry, they don't want to talk about that yet. Or, you know, I suppose
Yeah.
ask what they do and don't want to talk about. But, you know, for me, I can see the contrasts and in the intentions behind my own healing with my sister who died when I was 14 and she died of suicide when she was 16. And that was in the early 90s versus when our child died in 2020 of suicide. And I don't know if society has changed that much. But I do know what I experienced was when my sister died, it was this very dark topic. And we didn't even talk about her life much. And certainly not, I mean, it was just this, like, when you think of her, you immediately think of her death. She was defined by her death. And so much so that as horrified and painful it was when we lost our child, I knew that I couldn't let that happen. We were going to honor her life and not let her be defined by her death. And I don't know, because I've always been so close to the suicide, I don't know what the outside world really thinks of, you know, like stigma wise. So I'm kind of interested in this conversation, like before it happened close to your guys' families, what did you think of it? You know, I had one cousin that passed away from suicide right before my sister. It was like 2 months or something before my sister. And I was shocked, but I didn't know him very well. But my sister had been struggling with substance abuse and mental health issues. And so the idea of suicide had entered my world. But when he died, it was just like, oh, it's real. Like I always thought of it as just something somebody says to try to convey how much they're hurting, but it wouldn't really happen, you know. Of course, I was 14 at the time. What did I know? But yeah, I mean, as far as the stigma goes, I remember going back to school and I overheard this kid say a joke about my sister, and it involved the way she died, and that was supposed to be so funny. And to be honest with you, I don't remember. I know that I jumped at him, but I don't know what happened. I don't remember. But as far as like when my child died, I don't remember people saying cruel things about her,
I hope
you know.
not. You know,
But I mean, maybe they said it behind my back. I don't know.
and they know you'd come after them. You know where they all live. That's not true. Just anybody listening, that's not true. She wouldn't do that. But there are those things, right? And I think about if someone has died, so many people I know change the subject. So I've always used the word suicide. And I think my feeling is, and maybe it's just because I know so many people, I work with so many people who've lost someone to suicide. I don't feel like that carries the same stigma it did, though it certainly does for some. I remember a neighbor coming over a few weeks after Mikey died. She had been out of the country when he died, and she came over. And one of the first that she came over with her amazing beans and rice and a tulip, and sat there and said, "You know he's okay. There is no hell. You know he's okay." And she was very adamant. And
Oh, sweet.
I'll never forget that. I thought, what a wonderful thing. And I think about somebody who has lost someone, and maybe they committed a crime, maybe they died of an overdose, maybe any of these things that we often think of stigmatized, and we blame them, or we call them evil, or we say all these terrible things. Can we remember that this is a person and we don't know what led up to this? Is it mental illness? Was it abuse? Was there something in their life that we have no way of imagining? Can we find some grace and some compassion? And that doesn't mean ever saying what they did was okay. But can
Well,
we
yeah, you're
still,
not going to condone it, and also
right?
the living grievers that are, no matter how they died, even if they were an evil murderer, their mama loved them, you know.
I always say Adolf Hitler's mother would have grieved because there was a baby that she loved.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. And no one can know what's going on in another person. You just can't. You do not, and you never will. So half of us don't know what's going on in our own, aura and in our own minds. So yeah, that's just it to me. What this person did for you, Sandy, was like the sweetest thing I've ever heard. That's just lovely.
Yeah, my mom sat with worrying about my sister being in hell for years until she finally went to the priest, and the priest, a Catholic priest, assured her that God doesn't punish people for being sick, you know.
So can we talk about this?
Mm.
Now, whatever beliefs people have got, I respect. Believe me, I respect them. And I've had some very long conversations with people who have much more religious training than I will ever have, as well as with some mediums. And I remember one of the conversations talking about, does this mean someone was good or evil or something different? And I've never been able to come down. This is just me speaking. Please, I'm not trying to say this for anyone else. I've never been able to say that I think someone is evil. I always go back to not the human experience, the soul experience, because there are absolutely deeds that can be done. People who hurt children. There's, oh my gosh, while I'm saying love that child, the person who does this, we still have human justice, don't we? But when I think on that soul level, I think how undeveloped they are.
Mhm.
That
Well,
maybe
and that's why, like, we barely touched on the whole medium thing, but that was really, really healing for me to understand
say
the
more
whole
about that.
soul level things. Oh, so well, when my there's so many weird things that happened. When my sister died, wasn't when my sister died, let's see, it would have been like 8 or 9 years after. I kind of had a accidental encounter with a medium. I wasn't looking. I was dropping my son off at preschool, and she was dropping her daughter off at preschool, and it was a rainy day, and she had pulled her daughter in the wagon. And so I made her let me give her a ride home, and she invited me in for coffee. And she just all of a sudden had to tell me, this was, you know, so my sister had messages, and she mimicked my sister. She she told me things that nobody could possibly know. And my sister died before Google was born, nobody was using the internet yet, or most people weren't. But more than just the evidence that she spoke, it was this feeling that I got that just was like, there was no doubt about it. It just is what she says. But she had, the messages were, people who lose someone to suicide, we often place blame. And so this was clearing up the blame, was these messages. And that was, I kind of knew, but there was other people in my family that needed to hear it. And so that was cool. But then after we lost our child, I still, with my human mama heart, I still blame, but the medium helped me on a soul level understand. She said, because my child was with another person, and it was, in my opinion, staged to look like it was going to be a double suicide, but the other person lived. And as we were trying to gather enough evidence to bring about criminal charges and have, get an investigation launched and everything and get them charged, the pandemic hit, lockdown, everything fell apart, and then he died. So, I convinced myself, and I don't know if it's true or not, but this is the story that I told myself, that he figured out that we were after him, and he was going to go to prison, and that's why he finally, but I don't know that if that's true or not. But when I talked to the medium, I didn't tell her anything. My child came through, and there was evidence to prove that it was my child. And again, that feeling that you get. And then she asked me if I had any questions, and I said, well, this one that you were talking about was with someone else. And she said, and that's all I said. And the medium said, their souls had a contract. The only thing in that contract was that they were going to come into each other's lives to bring about the other's death. And of course, I didn't want to hear that because it felt so much better to blame. But apparently that was their contract. And the only reason why I entertain the possibility that it might be true is because of the other accuracies that this particular medium has. She's amazing. I swear she's just like, somebody from the other side who happens to live here among us. She just knows too much.
And when I think about those things, we are human. We're wearing this skin and this hair and these bones, aren't we? So we're going to have human experiences, which means we might be angry, whether it's justified or not. It's unfair. It's so many of these things that are cruel and brutal. And so that's one of the reasons I want to encourage someone to think about that soul. And I used to, when I'd have these conversations with people, and I love these conversations, are they very young? Think about the puppy that comes in and does dreadful things to your floor and chews up the door and bites you every time you walk by. It's not because they're evil. It's because they're young and they don't know better. So I wonder, are they very undeveloped? Are they very young? Or here's the other one that I still have a hard time wrapping my head around, but I think is a distinct possibility. My thought doesn't have to be yours. Maybe they are the oldest, wisest souls who are willing to come and do the hardest things for us.
Yeah, and that's kind of where my journey has taken me to, where me and my child had a soul contract as well, as did me and my husband, who also passed away from suicide 15 months after my child. So like these big messages, and here's me going, there's so many suicides way too close to me. What the heck? And so I had another reading. This one was an Akashic record. reading. And apparently, for those of you that don't know, it's the book of lives, the book of souls, you know, so it's supposed to keep a record of all of the lives that you've led. And so this is a karmic existence for me, is what I'm told. And it's not, karma isn't necessarily punishment, it's learning. And so I'm told that in my previous lives, that's how I passed away. And now I have to learn to not do that. And I have to learn what that felt like for my loved ones. And it's not, and again, it's not to punish me, it's to learn. It's for my soul school here on earth.
So when I think about some of these horrific deaths and the pain that's left behind, I find comfort in there, in what you just said and what we're talking about, that I wish we could do away with words like evil.
Right.
That they were doing what they were intended to do, or they were learning too. Dawn, what are your thoughts?
I wish that I could blindly believe all this stuff. I still am like, I don't know, but it makes sense to me. Sorry, go ahead, Dawn.
Well, it's so interesting because so my husband took his life in September, and probably about a year or so before that, I had connected with a psychic medium in Denver. Her name is Kim Moore, and she had not been doing it too long, but I remember when she talked about how she got into it, it was because her boyfriend committed suicide. Well, took his own life, and he didn't die right away. He was in the hospital, and she was with him, and she was not he had a wife, and she was the lover, and all of her children were this person's children. And she's written a book, so this is like, it's public record. It's not like it's private, or she keeps it from people. And she didn't know anything about this until this happened. And so she was like, she just couldn't believe that he was really gone, and that and she was pregnant also with a baby at the time. That that there was nothing else. And so she, I guess, found a medium, and that started her journey in realizing what she was supposed to do. And so she would have these psychic and personal development programs. And there was one coming up that started in like January. And I was like, I knew I was supposed to do this, but I was like, how can I do this? This is crazy. This is crazy. And so I said, well, it's a personal development group. So that's what I would call it. I would tell people I was going, and even my husband, I'm doing this personal development group, and we meet once every 3 weeks. And we just did the gamut. I mean, we went through everything that was spiritual, that was unusual. Okay. And so by the time we got to September, the next thing we were going to do was we were going to go someplace where we were going to clear out the energy in the house. And she liked to go to nursing homes because they were just so in need of it. So that's what we planned on doing. But when my husband took his life and it was in my house, then it was obvious that my house was where we were going to clear it. So it was 9 of us, and they all came to my house, and these women seriously saved my life through that whole time period of being support for me, being the people that I went to escape my fear of my husband taking my life. And so they came to the house, and we had lots of funny moments. There were so many funny moments. And my husband he swam when he was in high school. and he went to a Jesuit high school. And so he had his Speedos from high school still in this drawer, and he would wear them occasionally. I can remember him having worn them. And anyway, one of the first things I did before they came to the house was my anger came out in that I wanted to remove everything. I wanted it out of the house. And so that's what I did. Or maybe I was getting ready to, but anyway, the message came through that it was okay to get rid of the Speedos, because I didn't get rid of them. That's what it was. I decided I couldn't get rid of the Speedos because they were, I don't know, they were just with him for so long. And so one of the people in the class, and she was really funny, and she said, well, he told me, I said, were there some Speedos? I mean, I don't know, because the bedroom was part of where we were really clearing. And I said, yeah. I said, well, he's told me that it's okay for you to get rid of them now. I'm like, okay. So then we ended it by going into the place where he shot himself, and that was the garage. So we're all together in a circle holding hands, and Kim is, doing the ritual, and in the middle with fire, and he was there. And Kim said that he was really confused about what we were doing, but he wanted to be a part of it. And so Kim said, actually had the woman that was holding my hand, we let go of our hands so he could come into the circle and like I said, be a part of this. And for me, because his whole mental state had been really difficult for a long time. And so I could not feel any different in that house than any place else. But some of the women who came to do this, I mean, one of them did not want to actually go through the front door. It was so bad. So there is just so much good, I think, that can come out of talking to mediums and psychics, and because it's really together. I mean, a medium, like Kim says, I talk to dead people, so that's what she does. But the psychic is how we kind of feel about each other and can get the vibes of what, from all kinds of things. So anyway, that was, I mean, it just literally saved my life. And I can't say enough good about it. But I mean, I realize there are charlatans out there, but
So I suggest if someone's going to look for someone like this, they get a referral from somebody they trust.
Yeah.
Just like when I buy a car. It's not like there's not good dealerships and bad, but let's get a referral. And so
I've had a couple of them that were not accurate, and one that was just kind enough to not charge me, because I mean, you're supposed to pay them because there's no guarantees. But yeah, she wouldn't let me pay her because it just wasn't, nothing was happening there. But yeah, and that one did have, I think actually you referred me.
I know
but
who you mean. I
other
remember
people that
it.
have had wonderful luck with her. So
it just wasn't the day to dial in.
Right.
But when we think about someone who has, I keep thinking about the man whose son killed his family and then ended his own life. Can we not wrap that man in compassion?
Absolutely. I think we
He
should.
lost his grandchildren. He lost his daughter-in-law. He lost his boy.
Yeah. And there's a lot of hate being, put at his boy, understandably, but
exactly. Can we be aware of the language we use and know that this dad did the best he could, and think about whenever anybody's has died through any of these deaths that we might consider stigmatized, somebody loves them. Mm-hmm. They may not love what they've done, or they might approve, I don't know. But can we hold space for them? And they might have to run the gamut of all the blame. They might have to blame themselves and say they did all these things wrong. Can we be gentle and compassionate with them and remind them they did the best they could at the time too?
Well, and somebody who does something like that too, I'll take it a step further and have compassion for the person that did it. That's not a
Absolutely.
person in their right mind. That's not a person who's rational.
Or didn't know better. If you've been raised in an environment where it is survival by stealing or hurting people, it's what you know.
Yeah.
What do you know? So can we find grace? And for anybody who's grieving a death of someone that doesn't feel like it's safe to share, we're going to talk at the end of this about some places you can come because you deserve that compassion and that support. You know, when I think about those words that are so thrown around and I just want to flip off the TV or the news and make sure no one reads a newspaper, I don't want to hear people saying this person is burning. I don't happen to believe it. And every medium I've ever talked to said if somebody has died a horrific death or hurt others, they go to hospital. They get tender, loving care because
It's been
they need to
explained to
heal.
me like it was therapy.
They need to heal, right?
Yep.
So can we remember that there's so many things we don't understand, and can we just not be unkind?
Yeah.
Oh, this person I worked with at Denver, matter of fact, near the end of when I retired, and he had tattooed on his arm, and he was gay, and it said, "Be kind." And it
Thank you.
was right here on his inner arm. And I was like, I would see that so often, and it made me feel, it just made me feel good to see those two words, be kind.
And we've got judgments and we've got thoughts and we've got opinions. I get it. Can we just write them down and burn them up? Can we not deliver them to the person who's hurting?
Yeah.
Because
Well,
they
and
don't need any more piled on.
the thing that kind of baffles me is there some of us that have gone through a terrible experience, and so we kind of like have this clarity of what's really important, and don't be causing other people more pain because you don't know what they're going through, type of thing. But for someone who really doesn't care how you feel, and they're gonna say what they want to say and act how they want to act, and there's no, we can't control that either. How do we?
Whenever
Because
possible, have a protector.
yeah.
So if I have to be in that environment and I'm the one who's being given all the shame and the blame and people are piling on me, I'm going to invite my friends Dawn and Sandy to come and stand next to me.
Mm.
And you might have to gag me, or you might have to stand in front of me and ask me to leave because it's crushing.
Or like you said, yeah, turn off the TV because that's what's being said, or yeah.
Or put your
Because
arm around, if you're somewhere and you see it and you hear it, put your arm around the shoulder of that person and say, excuse us, we need to be outside for a few minutes.
Mhm.
And just tell that person that is not okay. Why is it helpful to hurt someone else more? What is the benefit of hurting someone more?
Yeah, I'm glad that especially when my husband died, there was a lot of people told me after the fact that they kind of felt like, how could he do that to my son and me, especially right after we lost our child. And they were upset with him, and thinking that he was selfish, and I'm like, I'm glad that they didn't say it to me in the moment. And no, my husband was not selfish, and he didn't do this at me. He was in absolute utter despair and couldn't see it ever getting better. So yeah, and you can't blanket statement either, because sometimes selfish people do die from suicide, but that doesn't mean that that's why they died from suicide, or maybe it is, I don't know, but
Or anything else. There are
I think
so many roads that will lead to potential outcomes that are not good, right?
so
And
maybe instead of, maybe we have to like filter our blurts and ask, and or not, just share space with someone who's struggling.
I think I agree with that. I agree with that. Can I sit with you?
Mhm.
Can we just breathe the same air?
Yeah.
If you want to talk, I'm happy to. If you
Mhm.
don't want to talk,
Mhm.
that's all right. Let's just be. Can we simply show up? Can we show up? And it can be really hard. I think about like that person I was telling you who came over and with the beans and the tulip and one of the, she was she very staunch in her religion, which is very different than mine. And she said, "If you're all right, I think we need to take a few minutes to all pray here." A gift. What a gift. And for some people, their beliefs, it can be additional pain. And if that's the case, I encourage you to keep looking.
Yeah.
Well, but I mean, the way she offered up a prayer, it was
Beautiful. It was a gift.
it was just next to you. It wasn't shoving it down your throat, you know?
It was an offering, just like we're talking about mediums and we're talking about our beliefs of what happens on the other side, afterlife, whatever language you like. It's what makes sense to us. For somebody else, that's really painful. So can we meet them where they are without telling them they're wrong?
Yeah.
Because that's not helpful.
No,
I'm
it's
pretty
not.
fortunate. I'm pretty fortunate that nobody told me that I was wrong in what I was doing. I had some people question, but I think that they knew better than to poo-poo it in any way, you know?
And is this healthy for you? Does it feel okay? If it's something that's going to beat you up and make you feel worse, how can we shift that? What can we do? How can we meet people who are grieving these horrible deaths that bring so much shame? What might you say to someone?
Seriously, just wait for them to do the talking. Just remind them to breathe and bring them some water and crackers or something and wait for them to do the talking. They'll get it out when they need to.
I think, like for me, just to touch them in some way would be important. Little, oh, how does that feel, or to touch their arm or to hold their hand. Because I think generally if you do that, almost anyone would just fall into a hug because they need it so badly. And it's just touch because they've lost that. If they've lost someone, that touch may be gone for them. And I think that's really important.
For some of us, I need someone to ask if that's okay. Because there were times,
Yes,
well, because and here's why, because there were some times when I needed to keep it together for whatever reason. And I couldn't always fall apart.
Yeah.
The human
I
touch
can
is
remember
so
too,
important. I agree with you.
when my sister passed away, I have this very vague memory of my uncle coming, and I think he just asked me if I wanted to go for a drive or something. And there was nowhere to go. We just got in the car, and I'm 14, and I think he let me drive for a little bit. And I
Perfect.
think he just wanted to distract me. He wanted to get me out of the house, let me breathe a little bit. I don't know what his intentions were. I don't know what his thoughts were. I still haven't asked him about it. And like I said, it's such a vague memory. You got the brain fog in the beginning. And this was so long ago, but yeah, he just, I think he would have been fine if I talked or fine if I didn't talk. I don't remember whether I did or not, but he just
But what you
spent
both
some time
say
with me.
makes so much sense.
Mm-hmm.
Can we make space for them to talk or not?
Mm-hmm.
If it's someone is open to the touch, I agree, Dawn. There's nothing better because we miss that, don't we? And if you're around someone like me, that's so precious. And sometimes I can't.
Yeah, because like you said, if somebody hugs you and that's going to make you, the waterworks are going to start flowing. Yeah. And when you have to keep it together.
And there's no right or wrong for any of this. Again, let's remember we're going to make mistakes. But can we
And then
err on
there's
the
somebody
side of
like my brother hugs me and he forces my face and then I can't breathe.
That's most of my relatives. Most of my relatives. Right. And that can be funny too, because it makes you laugh, right? But can we Can we just make room for them? Can we just be kind? What did Dawn say? Just be kind. Can we imagine? We see it across the forehead. Can we just be kind?
Well, and I
If
think
we were
too,
experiencing this loss, would we appreciate someone bad mouthing that person, even if it's what we agree with?
No.
well, and the other thing is, we've all experienced suicide losses. And so we all have that list of things that we wish people would never say. And they mean well. It's kind of one of those things where they don't, it comes across to me as though they don't know what to say, but they're trying to say something good.
Yeah.
And sometimes it doesn't come out so good. But yeah, if you don't know what to say, just be. You don't
And it
have
can
to
be,
say anything. You can
I think
say, I
it can
don't
be,
know what to say.
thank you. That's exactly what I was just thinking. It's so helpful to say, I feel like I should come up with something.
Yeah.
I don't know what to say. I can't imagine what this is for you. I want you to know I love you.
Yeah. Or I want you to know I care.
Mhm,
I care about you.
mhm.
And I'm sorry this hurts. And I think another big piece of it, and this is just my thought, so please, ladies, tell me what you think. That person who's dying that horrific death might need the place where they can unload and just be furious.
Mhm. Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Let's
There's been
give
a
them
lot of,
the space to
I was
rage.
very angry when my sister died. I was so angry at her. And I think I unloaded at a couple of kids at school. Poor kids. But it comes out when it comes out. You know?
Right. So it always keeps coming back to exactly what Dawn said. Can we be kind? I'm sure I've said some pretty boneheaded things in my years, and I probably have a few left to go. Can we do the best we can? And can we just offer some compassion? And we don't know what's in store for the rest of our lives.
Mhm.
So before we go, what other thought do Sandy, Dawn, what other thoughts do you have about the griever and the person who wants to support the griever? What might you tell them?
If I may, I hate to like extend this longer than you intended,
I don't
but
mind.
I have a lot of opinions, especially regarding things like suicide, accidental overdose, things like that. Um, I really do want to fight the stigma because I believe, and this is, my sister died when I was 14. I've spent my whole life trying to understand this. Before there was the internet to do the research, I was trying to understand it, and um, and I think that language is important. And one of the things that I find important, do you guys know who the guy is? Oh, I forget his name. But the ripple effect, he's the one that he jumped off the Golden Gate Bridge but survived. So he's brilliant. He does a lot of talks now. He writes and he does like motivational speaking and things like that now. But he talks about changing the language from mental illness to brain disease, because that's literally what it is. It's physiological. It's not just thoughts in your head. There are physical changes in a person's brain. And I know it's not a total blanket statement, but most of the time, severe depression is behind suicide, and it's not somebody doesn't choose to have that disease. They have an organ that is diseased, and that diseased organ has malfunctioned. And I even if that person was abusive, even if that person was very cruel in life, healthy people generally don't behave that way. I it seems to me, it makes sense to me that these people, even that behavior, that was part of the diseases that they have. So that is part of the stigma, the idea that that, oh, these are just thoughts. No, it's physical changes in a person's brain that causes this disease. And and they can't always help it. They can't, I used to describe it like, if depression lies to you. And since it's something in your own head, you believe it. Because why would it be there if it wasn't what you truly thought, So, so that's something that I want to try to find a way to just get rid of the stigma once and for all. It just makes me nuts.
That's what you're doing by talking about it, though. And I think the same is true for many horrific things that happen. I agree. I kind of wish that if you have mental illness, brain disease, that there were an armband you wore so people would know. Because if I break my leg, they can see I have a cast. And someone will open a door for me and they'll be a little patient when I hobble.
If you have diabetes, you wear your medical alert bracelet.
Exactly. So I agree that there should, that's why I've always owned that my son died of suicide. I've never made up sweet little words. This is how he died. That's the door he went through to get to the other side. But let me tell you about this guy. He was fun. And we miss them. So if maybe somebody has turned out to be a terrible criminal. I don't know what made them like that. And I'm never going to condone what happened. But I want to offer grace and compassion to everybody who loved that person. And can I please extend something to that person because something created them? And maybe we can't do that in the beginning. But hopefully, if we're supporting someone who's going through this loss, we can help them find their way to that place.
Yeah. I wonder also, like, I think of like my own church, and I would love to know how I could support people who were going through something like this. Like, I know for me, there was a suicide survivor group, which my psychic medium is the one who told me about it. And I could see myself being in a group like that today, which would be so different than it was then, because I would know some of the things to ask, just as a participant that weren't asked in that group. But just to kind of, say, it's okay. That person was a worthwhile person, and your grief is okay. It's okay that you don't feel well and that this is hard for you, because grief is grief no matter what the circumstances are. And
Well, and if I can add to that, because I know a lot of people are nervous about joining those support groups. You don't have to say anything. You don't have to talk. You don't have to participate. What I've noticed for myself is even when I can't bring myself to participate, I never, ever leave there without the sense of, I was supposed to hear that today. There was something that I got out of that I had to have.
Hopefully you're in a place of compassion and caring, and it oozes. It oozes. Well, I'm so glad you both joined me for this conversation. So I didn't introduce you in the beginning. I'd like people to know who you are and as much or little as you would like to share about you. Dawn, would you like to begin?
Sure. I'm Dawn Lauren Anderson. And if you go to dawnlaurenanderson.com, you can sign up for my newsletter, which I put out about once a week. And it's about healing from grief and many other things. Whatever brings me joy will be in there. So, and I've been blogging for a real long time. So I really would appreciate that. And you can also find me on social media through that outlet. And I live in North Carolina. And of course, I'm a master grief coach. So I am excited to hear from any of you.
And I highly recommend subscribing to Dawn's blog because it's pretty brilliant and it always makes me happy.
Good.
I'm so glad you were here. Sandy, you're muted again.
I always do because you never know what's going to be making noise over here.
That's me.
I'm Sandy Kashanina. I am a master grief coach, but I'm not taking clients right now. I'll keep you posted.
She's excellent and well worth coming to when you have time. And I'm Sandy Walden. I am a master grief coach. I also offer a master grief coach certification. And in fact, at the time of this recording, we're in March of 2024 and a new class is beginning in April. So if you're ready to step into that role of supporter, to develop the skills and the abilities to support someone effectively on their grief journey and also deepen your own healing journey, please reach out to me. And also in April, it will begin a group that I offer, which is Embracing Grief Healing, a Journey to Peace. These are deliberately small groups. They go for 12 weeks and we touch on a new topic every week. It includes recordings, meditation, journal prompts, much discussion. And it's really, there's something very special. Both of you spoke a little bit about being with others. And that's what happens when we come together. We hear someone else's story. We see things from a different point of view. We find ourselves supported in ways we may not have expected. So you can also find me on Facebook and my website, sandywalden.com. And please like and subscribe so that you never miss one of our conversations. Sandy and Dawn, thank you so much for joining me. I always appreciate time spent with you. Namaste.
Namaste.
Namaste.